Welcome to the podcast with Scott Brinker. He's with Hubspot. Over to you, Scott. Could you just please take a minute and help our audience understand about your work and the industry that you're in and what excites you about your work and industry?
Yes, thank you so much for having me. So I kind of wear two hats in the industry. I am the Vice President of Platform Ecosystem at HubSpot, where I help HubSpot do a better job of integrating with hundreds, on our way to thousands of other apps, throughout the business tech stack. So I get to work with a lot of great startups, bringing their products to market and go to market in our ecosystem. And then the other hat I wear is for, oh my goodness, more than a decade now. I've been writing the Chief Martech blog. I was the founding chair of the Martech conference, just really focused on, this collision between the world of IT and software and technology, and marketing that, has just gone through an incredible transformation here over the past 10 years.
Cool. So that takes me to our first question, Scott. In the world of marketing technology, what is your take on the evolution of this industry, especially, let's say, the last decade, and your observation on how is it fulfilling its potential?
Yeah, it has been an incredible ride here for the past 10 years. So I almost think there were kind of two waves of marketing technology. So the first one, really from around 2010 to maybe 2017 or so, was this first explosion. We went from having a few hundred marketing technology solutions in the market to having literally thousands of marketing technology solutions in the market. But to be honest, a lot of them, I'll say they were trying to basically run the more classic enterprise software playbook, which, was a good strategy. Certainly a lot of larger companies who were looking to, tap into digital marketing capabilities, had the resources to invest in it. And so you had a lot of successful companies, but the experience of the software and the experience of the sales process was still, kind of classic enterprise software just in the cloud. Versus, I feel like the second wave we really started to see, particularly over the past 2, 3, 4 years, has been almost more of a, the whole notion of like product-led growth, has certainly applied in Martech and sales tech as much as any other category. The phrase consumer grade user experience, has really, it gets tied in with product-led growth. If you don't have a great user experience for your product, it's hard for the product to win people over on its own. But yeah, we've just seen incredible improvements in PLG and, consumer grade UX in the Martech space in these past few years. And I think that's been phenomenal too, because in many ways that is democratizing a lot of the innovation in these marketing technology solutions to just make them more accessible to more companies and, more professionals.
Exciting. So what are the areas, especially in this marketing technology, that you feel have really helped the industry evolve faster?
Have or haven't?
Have.
Okay, yes. Because the haven't is an interesting question too. I think part of it is it's a combination of supply and demand. So on the supply side, all the economics of bringing software to market in the cloud have just radically transformed what we think of as the software industry. Now, leveraging, cloud infrastructure from, Amazon and Google and Alibaba and whatnot. Open source software, all these incredible API services that are available, it's just incredibly easy now for someone with an idea, to be able to bring new software to market. And so this is part of what has fed this just incredible explosion in the supply of marketing technology today. But of course, supply is only one half of the equation. The other side is demand. And really what it comes down to is companies are now competing in the digital domain. That is where the competition is happening, to win customers, to engage customers, to delight customers. I mean, the craziness of the past couple of years here with the pandemic certainly accelerated the heck out of that. But basically, because everyone is now competing in the digital domain, marketers are incredibly hungry, for any sort of capability they can get that will give them a competitive edge. And let's face it, there's a lot of innovation. There's a lot of opportunity for competitive edge there, and so what you've got there is incredibly strong demand, from the market for innovative solutions. And so that combination of, a flood of supply, and still like really strong demand, meeting it, just like entwined together to deliver incredible growth to this industry in the past 5 to 10 years.
That leads me to the next question. Have companies actually figured out how to make marketing work for them in the digital world fully? Also, are there areas where you feel marketing technology could be applied better?
Yes. So I mean, it's a distribution curve, and there are some companies at the top of the curve who are phenomenal at this, right? I mean, they're leveraging digital marketing, digital sales as a way to really win. But then there's this other distribution of companies that are at different stages in their journey. I would say most companies still have quite a ways to go. I mean, these are net new skills. These are net new capabilities. Change is hard. Getting the right talent, developing the talent is hard. And so I think, we've still got quite a ways to go. And it doesn't help, or I guess maybe it does help if you really lean into this, but the field is not static, right? Like the expectations of what you needed to do to be successful in digital marketing last year are slightly different this year. This space continues to evolve very rapidly through, changes in the environment around compliance, things like the third-party cookie kerfuffle and how that's, changing the whole Martech ad tech landscape. Fact of new channels. I mean, there's all this discussion lately about, the metaverse, depending on who you ask what that means. But right, at some way, like these are new channels, new experiences that marketers are going to have to find a way to engage with, for their audiences. And so it's like, if you're in marketing today, you're just in a state of constant learning and experimentation. The industry is just not standing still.
Thanks for insights, Scott. So how should you suggest marketing technology be strategized and adopted inside a company? Like, let's assume a startup which is like 2 years old, right? Still just figuring out its feet, has got a certain GTM in the market. It's figured out, okay, this is what is working digitally for them in terms of marketing. It has not probably figured out everything in terms of the channels online, but yeah. So how do they strategize their marketing technology stack or the entire strategy around marketing technology?
Yeah, that's a great question, because I think there's kind of two angles you take to that, and it's kind of finding the balance between them. So one level is the actual capabilities, and this is very much typically what a marketing operations, marketing technology leader inside the marketing organization is responsible for, is making sure, that the underlying infrastructure, the, stack that we have, the capabilities, the way they're configured and put together, that you now have this set of powers, in place for how the marketing department, can find, engage, and delight customers. But that has to be paired with the actual marketing strategy itself. Like it's how we how we leverage this infrastructure and these capabilities, creatively, with the empathy and understanding, like, okay, what makes our company unique? What's our, position with our audience? Really applying these technologies, in creative and strategically smart ways. At the end of the day, that's really what has the ultimate impact on, are people successful with their marketing technology stack? And so, yeah, I definitely feel like you need, it takes a village. It needs both, the head of marketing tech and marketing ops to be, building the right infrastructure, but it requires the people who are leading, either the campaigns or the demand gen or the customer experience side, to really have a clear vision of what do they want to deliver to the customer? What do they feel is the winning way to reach and engage people in this digital domain? And that has to be a partnership.
Understood. So at this point, do you suggest our audience to look at RevOps? I think in one of your sessions, you've spent some time on RevOps. So is that approach good for startups?
Yes. I mean, I think one of the things is, like, in the industry, we get carried away with our terminology here. And so if you're just getting started as a small startup, like, I mean, boy, you've got your hands full. You're probably not going to have a dedicated marketing ops person, much less dedicated sales ops and customer success ops, and then get them all rolling up to RevOps. But you have to grow a bit into these. But that being said, if we stop for a moment and not worry so much about the labels, and we say, in the digital domain, the speed by which customers move across marketing, sales, and customer service touch points is incredibly fast and fluid, And so I think, the concept of RevOps is to say, listen, these activities and these systems and the data that we have in place cannot be siloed, separate in marketing, separate in sales, separate in customer service. We really do need these pieces to fit together into a bigger picture of how we see the end-to-end customer journey. How do we make sure there's continuity to that? How do we make sure that all the teams are aligned in the proper ways and how they're delivering that collective experience? And that's really, to me, one of the big missions of the RevOps concept, is to provide that connective tissue, across all of the customer-facing, customer-touching pieces of the digital business. And so even if you don't have an official RevOps team as a startup, I would highly recommend, like, thinking about how you structure the capabilities being built there with a RevOps mindset.
Yeah, I think personally, I'm fascinated by the concept because in my company, we're trying to do a lot of automations and begin our journey in automations. And RevOps as a concept made a lot of sense to me when I wanted to look at marketing technology, marketing strategy, and overall organization. So definitely, I think startups should look at RevOps in the way you've defined it. Coming to that thought on marketing automation, right? Like, startups in their journeys are adopting marketing automation much more than, let's say, 5 years ago or 10 years ago. Like, we as an organization are also trying to do a lot of automation, not just in marketing, but also in other processes. So I read about this thing called Big Ops, the way you've defined it, and it resonated well with me. Probably it does resonate with a lot of companies of varying sizes. So my question is, how do you suggest companies get their automation journeys right? Okay, like, how should they get this culture strategy right in adopting automation in the right way?
Yeah, wow, this is a fun topic. Yeah, I kind of feel like, there's been so much emphasis in everyone going digital about the customer experience, which is great, right? I mean, it's important to get the digital customer experience right. But there's been less recognition of actually how much the digitalization of internal process and operations is actually having as much, if not even more, of an impact on how businesses actually work. And it's why I mean, the phrase big ops is sort of this recognition that you now see these digital ops teams popping up all over the company. It's data ops and marketing ops and business ops and legal ops. It's I mean, it's crazy. It's awesome that you have these things moving in this direction, but what seems to be missing right now is a recognition of how to connect these different pieces together and to provide some overarching standardization and some governance, so that you don't end up with, like in the days of big data, right? All the concern was like, this fragmentation and siloization of data. We're getting much better now at, unifying data into, common data warehouses and things like that. It's kind of like now we've got that same challenge, but at the ops levels, we've got this siloization and this fragmentation of different kinds of automation happening all throughout the company, but there's not a lot of like visibility, at the higher level of like, okay, well, where are the handoffs between these things, and how do we make sure that automations aren't getting orphaned, or that if there's some sort of problem, like if there's an exception that happens with a particular automation, how responsive is the company able to be to even realizing that and take action to correct that. And so I think first and foremost, it's just a matter of like recognizing how big of a deal this is and making sure that the teams involved are really investing in that. But I think you also want to start to look at like, okay, how do we aggregate some of these capabilities? Aggregate around like automation for the customer touch points, aggregate around an automation platform for DevOps, aggregate around an automation platform for perhaps all of the other business operations. Partly so that, I mean, you keep your SaaS spend managed, partly so you have some standardization in what people learn how to do across the company. You get some economy of scale, but as much for anything, just to make sure that we're starting to provide visibility to how the automated firm actually runs. So I think this is going to be it's a huge opportunity, for startups who are addressing this space, just because, it's so new and there's just so much work to be done to figure out how do we do this well.
Yeah. So let's say as a startup founder, I'm a startup founder as well. Do I think of automation strategy from top to bottom, or like from bottom to top? What I mean is, let's say, do I figure out like the individual automation, individual process automations inside respective teams, or do I first define that this is what an automation needs to achieve for this company, and then drill it down and see where it takes me?
Yeah, I actually think it's a mix of both. I think from the top down, you want to have some standardization on platforms, and you want to have a good governance framework, so that when automations get put in place, you really, that they have that visibility, that they have the SLAs, that there's ownership associated with them, so things don't, suffer from entropy or get lost somehow. So I think you want that top down framework and governance. But the actual implementation of automation, I think it's fantastic for that to be much more of a bottoms-up led activity, because it's really the people in these individual teams and the folks on the front line of, both our back office technical processes and our, front office customer experience, that they actually understand the jobs to be done. They actually understand, where the connection points need to be made. And I think if you're able to empower them, that many of these now low code and no code automation platforms support, you can kind of get the best of both worlds of all that sort of creativity and on the ground knowledge of, what really needs to be automated, but at the same time provide a bit of a top down governance structure so it isn't like total chaos.
Yes, and organizations tend to grow very fast, right? Let's say automation is for growing so fast. So let's say if you define it bottom up and you're growing fast, I want to visualize how a top-down view should still be maintained such that there's not a lot of chaos which cannot be managed later on.
Exactly. I think And again, it doesn't have to be a super strong hand, top down. I think, again, this is part of the power of, distributed workforces, and the democratization of technology with no code, low code capabilities. Is the bottom up is an incredible source of power that you want to be able to tap into. But you do want that top-down standardization on saying, okay, here are the minimum requirements that any given automation, needs to have, inside a business. It needs to have an owner, it needs to have some sort of like auditability so that we know, did it work? Did it not work? It needs to, be visible, in some sort of, higher level framework, so that if somebody leaves or, somebody changes jobs or, whatever it is, that these automations don't end up orphaned, and sort of like zombie automations that can cause all sorts of havoc for us. So I think you want to be really clear about like establishing the rules and the guardrails for that. But inside those rules and guardrails, I say, yes, by all means, let the creativity flourish.
So would you have any case study to recommend to the audience? Let's say some company that you suggest we study who has done this well, like both the bottom-up approach and the top-down simultaneously?
Oh, wow. Just a ton of companies have done it. I have to be careful on the spur of the moment that I don't give away one that I'm under confidentiality with. But I guess I would suggest, like, if you even go to like a product like Workato, and you look at some of the case studies of, the companies who are leveraging a tool like that. I mean, Workato to me is one of those, providers that's thought a lot about the both top-down governance structure, and the sort of bottom-up democratization of the tool. And so you see they have a number of their customers that, they don't just use Workato in some sort of isolated department, but they've actually found ways to adopt it across the organization as a broader automation framework.
Got it. Thanks for the insight. So let's say with the pandemic, I think digital marketing has changed considerably, taken a lot of turns. We're still figuring out what turns it has taken, perhaps. And a lot of businesses would have taken to digital marketing for the first time and tried understanding the passages there. So what has worked really well for companies in digital marketing in the last 18 months, like according to you?
Oh, that's a great question. Well, I think, first of all, web experience cannot be underestimated. Yes, the idea of the company web presence is, 25 years old here at this point. So it's sometimes easy to say, oh, well, that isn't really the sexy thing. But the truth is, like, it's our website that, so many prospects and customers uses their primary digital touch point to us. And so you still today can go around from website to website, and some of them are great. A lot of them aren't that great. Some of them are downright like awful, like they don't provide the right content, or they're just hard to navigate, or any sort of app-like functionality, is kind of weird and wacky. And so I would say, yes, before anything else, like, get that web experience right, make sure, it's, mobile optimized, this ties into all the strategies you probably want to be doing with search engine optimization and content marketing. And, increasingly now, as we're in the space where there's more and more digital commerce happening, even in B2B, this is, again, like, as the majority of that conduit is now coming through these web touch points. Just make sure you're investing in getting that experience right.
Yes. So just trying to go deeper into this part, let's take an example of an industry that I think perhaps has exploded a lot more than earlier. Already it was happening well, but I think it definitely exploded due to the pandemic. This is D2C, direct to consumer, right? So e-commerce was already there. We had Amazons and other companies, right? But then due to great marketing technology of all kinds, better distribution capabilities, most of the touch points that a customer has gone digital, right? And has that really changed marketing a lot more? Like the advent of, let's say, the industry called D2C.
Yeah, and I think you've picked a fantastic example. D2C is, yeah, I mean, really, this is where the revolution has been happening in, creating a whole bunch of digital first businesses that aren't about a digital product. They're about a real world, product or service. But the entire engagement around it, is both finding and attracting customers, but then actually engaging and serving them through entirely digital channels. And so, yeah, there's just, if you want to learn how to do the very best things, you look at the companies that are, evolving the fastest. And I think D2C companies are a great example of that. I think one of the things with D2C companies that's pretty exciting is, we mentioned in passing earlier, this kerfuffle around third-party cookies going away, the degree to which that's going to impact, advertising, digital advertising. There's lots of debate about how big or not big the actual impact will be. But, let's assume for a moment that, yes, the world is going through some churn. Most of these D2C companies have really thrived because they've invested so much in direct relationships with those customers. In fact, a whole bunch of it's actually happening through email. I mean, again, email is one of these channels that, it's been around from the beginning. It's like the oldest channel, in digital marketing, arguably. But it's still, to this date, there are companies that do a really good job of, both the quality of what they're delivering, the way in which they figured out how to personalize, getting the right, emails at the right cadence to, their right segments, to really then fulfill the promises when people engage with those emails, what happens next when they take a click, that whole post-click marketing or post-click commerce experience. Yeah, so I mean, again, almost goes back to, yes, there's some really innovative technology here too, but a lot of it comes down to just the actual execution and strategy of a great experience.
Yes, and I think industry has suddenly evolved to take ownership of newer channels, let's say video commerce, right? I think D2C startups are also experimenting highly with newer customer reach out channels. I think video commerce has done really phenomenally well across the world, especially in my part of the world.
Yes, I would agree with that. And I mean, again, this is kind of the thing that, when we were talking about the big ops side, this ties into it because very often, the way you're winning in digital marketing is because of this rapid agility for experimenting with new ideas. You can try a whole bunch of new ideas. You can try them quickly. You can try them cheaply. Most of the new ideas you try out don't quite work out, but then you keep trying more. And then, of course, you find the ones that are the winners. And then when you find a winner, you're very quickly able to scale it, expand it as much as it's actually capable of loading. And so you think about like, yes, okay, from a strategic perspective, that makes sense. But to actually be able to deliver on that, right, you need to have your internal operations be able to adapt and move at that sort of speed. And that's really where the behind the scenes, the backstage, digital capabilities and the management mindset, supporting that really needs to embrace the agility too.
And is it easier with, let's say, smaller companies than with enterprises?
Oh, I mean, absolutely. Yes, it's the perennial advantage that startups always have, is their ability to just stay coordinated, to stay agile, to I mean, the risk of, for startups is never the status quo. Startups are disrupting the status quo. So they definitely lean into it. And that is always the advantage of the startup. Take as much leverage of that as you can.
Especially if, let's say, the ability and the culture to experiment is good. And if that meets, let's say, funding, that's like a very nice combination to take on any status quo.
Yes. Yeah, completely.
Yes. Nice. So this whole conversation around Meta. since a few weeks, I suppose, since Facebook started talking about it. How do you think the world of marketing is going to change?
Yeah, it's a great question. And to be
Like,
honest,
it's just, I mean, I'm just asking you to be imaginative. I mean, there's no right or wrong answer here.
yeah, no, well, I mean, because part of what I would say is the two things that immediately come to mind is, first of all, I have no idea what it's going to actually look
Yeah,
like. But the second is, I'm 100% certain that it's going to be new and different than what we have today. I mean, this is the state of marketing, is just the environment is changing rapidly, and you have to be prepared to experiment and learn and adapt. But I think it's wow, to me, it's so exciting because if I let my imagination run, it's this idea that an increasingly AR, VR experience is just going to be so much richer, and everything from I don't know. Let me pick just, one thing. So let's say it's in the context of, B2B, and, it's the top of the funnel for engaging a prospect. So once upon a time, the way in which that happened was, physically in person at things like trade shows, or people doing sales calls as, field staff would fly into different cities. And then in this past couple of years with the pandemic, one of the things we realized is, oh, well, hey, my goodness, actually, we don't need to get on an airplane and fly to all these places. We can do a lot of this, through digital channels. It's more efficient, for us, it's more efficient for the customer. But we kind of realize, yes, there are all these benefits that, happen from taking, a more digital only or, approach to that. But something was lost, right? I mean, just the richness of the experience, and what it looks like sitting through a Zoom meeting is just not the same, And I think the thing about the whole metaverse and VR and AR is not that I think it'll ever replace, some of the dynamics of in person, but I think if you look at there being a continuum with like a Zoom meeting on one end and the real life, engagement at a restaurant, as another, the AR and VR experiences that are going to be developed here over the next 5 years, I think are going to give us a lot more flexibility between those two extremes. And I think that's going to be an incredible heyday for marketing and sales and customer service.
Interesting. And what use cases you think that it will take to first? Like, let's imagine, do you think it will be more about experiencing technology in malls, getting different experiences and then translating those experiences onto, let's say, digital platforms?
Yeah, if history is any judge, the biggest advances in technology are not those that are trying to replicate something from a previous channel and say like, oh, well, this is what worked in television, so let's move this to the internet. Like if that's all that YouTube had become was, oh, well, this is just a larger set of television channels, that, I mean, it would have been fine, but, nothing like the explosion that happened where, wait a second, given the dynamics of how this works, like there doesn't have to be this constraint of who can be a creator. I mean, what makes YouTube actually work is essentially infinite creators, the entire creator economy, and that like changed the entire trajectory, of the entertainment industry with this. And so I kind of feel it's like the same thing is like, yeah, we'll probably start of trying to take things like, conference meetings and trade shows and stuff like that and, create virtual versions of it. And I think they'll be interesting. But if I had to bet money, I bet there's going to be like some native kind of experience that gets created in these worlds that, yeah, it's almost impossible to imagine any like real world, analog to it. And that those are going to be the things that like really take off.
Got it. I think we can schedule another session just to discuss that further. Yeah. So, I think this is already like a lot for this podcast, but I think there's one question that I personally wanted to understand more. There's a lot of focus on content marketing for every founder. I mean, they feel content is something that they can use to engage their audiences better. Um, more so in terms of just informing them of what the world is, but there is no clear, concise strategy behind what they can do with content and how they should be adopting the content strategy over a longer term. So, what would be their advice? I mean, what would you advise to the startups and how to figure out the right content strategy in the modern digital world?
Yeah, I think my advice would be do fewer things really well. I mean, there are just so many channels. There are so many possible ways in which you can, create content. And I think, yeah, just as a startup, you're limited, in time and resources, and the competition you have, not the direct competitor to your company, but just the competition for attention that you have in people's lives is ridiculously intense, And so I kind of feel like, yeah, there was a time where like the easy content strategy was all about quantity, just get the quantity. I don't think that works anymore. I think, you are far better off having like one or two or three things that you really focus on, and they add so much value. Like people look at it and they're like, wow, that is an incredible piece of content, and they share it and they appreciate it, and the value they associate with your company and your brand as a result of having created that, really moves you forward in the positioning, in the mind of those prospects. And again, for every company, it's going to be different what that, one or two things is, whether it's like, the killer newsletter, or it's, the best report, or some sort of like, really creative podcast show that, like your whole mission is like, let's break through, like, let's make this, a world-class show. Find the one or two that's most relevant to your audience and just double down on them.
That's, I think, is a fantastic suggestion, and that should work. Like, I'm sure most of the startups think that if they can work on all the channels, it might work for them, but instead, it may better serve them to just go deeper in one channel.
I think it's a good way to start.
Exactly.
Win with one, and then earn the right to grow in the next year.
True. So true. In fact, if they can do one channel well, probably they figure out a totally new channel, and that could be a good strategy for them, like creating their own channel.
Yep, somebody win. Like this is a beautiful thing about the landscape continuing to evolve, and there's always new channels. There's always new ways of engaging people, and whoever figures out those things first, they get a real advantage.
Sounds good. So this point is so easy to understand, but so difficult for a startup founder who's like, or even the marketing teams at startups, right? They're so engaged in like doing the day-to-day tasks that they've defined over months, right? That they forget or don't understand what that new channel can be. So would you have any advice on how to keep track or how to identify this new channel?
Wow. I mean, all I can say is like, keep your eyes open. Anytime, like reading TechCrunch, or, you're on Twitter, or, there are always these new channels that are popping up, throughout these. I mean, and they're not always completely net new channels. Sometimes it's an entirely different way, like all the experiments Twitter has started doing, I don't know which of those will like stick around and which ones will work, but it's the perfect example of there's experimentation that's happening there, and some of those will work and some of them will break through. And if you figure out how to make that work to your advantage before anyone else does, that's a win.
Got it. Moving on to some recommendations on resources that startups can look out for marketing automation strategy. Any recommendations?
I'm biased here, but I would say HubSpot Academy is actually a great set of resources. In all seriousness, not just
it goes without saying. I think all of the startup founders start there.
But the other thing is like, if you want to stay up to speed on, Martech things, my blog, Chief Martech, I'll give that a plug, martech.org, which is a publication in the space. David Robb, who's like sort of the expert of all things customer data platform, the CDP Institute, has a great daily newsletter. There's a ton of resources out there. There's more resources than time in the day.
Time, yes, absolutely. And some of the low-code platforms that you think will define the future of marketing.
Oh, yeah. I'd hate to pick favorites at this point, just because there are hundreds of them doing this. I almost feel at this point, I feel about low code, no code, kind of the same way I ultimately felt about AI, which is I don't think it's so much a category, so much as it's just a new capability that's being embedded in pretty much every product. Yeah, I mean, not every product, but asymptotically, it's like, well, if you have a CMS platform at this point, you surely have like low code, no code capabilities for it. For marketing automation, low code, no code, it's being built in, the CRM. It's just like, it's a way of basically saying, hey, for all of these incredible products that people are adopting in digital business, we don't want to be constrained by just what they do out of the box. And we don't want to have to, hire expensive software engineers anytime we want to like change any tiny thing about this. We want more and more power to be in the hands of the business users, in MarTech, in the hands of the marketers, to be able to shape and create and flow things the way that they want.
Yeah. That's a good view on how low code and no code are actually transforming software, right? So, my final question: any particular individual or professional that you recommend that we should talk to next to continue the discussion on marketing technology, marketing automation?
Oh wow, so many great people out there. Yeah, well, if you haven't spoken to David Robb yet at the CDP Institute, I mean, boy, he's followed this industry for, I think before I entered this industry, okay. So he's got like a really, like a long-term view, but absolutely state-of-the-art understanding of what's happening around marketing automation and CDPs. So I guess he would be my nomination.
Thanks so much. So that's it, Scott. I think we're touching 45 minutes. So thanks so much for your time. And I hope you enjoyed the questions, and we could share the transcript with you and the raw recording and a finished version of the podcast so that you can share it with your network. I'll keep you posted on that.
Yeah, that sounds great. Well, thank you so much for having me as a guest, and look forward to seeing the final version and helping to spread it around.
Thanks so much, Scott. Thanks so much for your time, and let's connect again on other topics.
Sounds good. Have a good evening. Thank you again.
Thank you. Thank you, Scott. Bye-bye.